So welcome everybody. My name is Rhiannon and I'm the General Manager for Australasian Campuses Towards Sustainability, or ACS, known for short. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of myself and my co-organisers for day one of the second joint ACS Prime SDSN Regional Forum for Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific on mainstreaming education for the Sustainable Development Goals in higher education. It's quite the mouthful there. I would like to start our session today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands from which we all respectively meet today and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend those respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who join us in the forum today. I live and work on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the Kulin Nation representing an alliance of the 5 language groups who are the traditional owners of the lands that cover Naarm, also known as Melbourne, and much of central Victoria. So I do invite all of our audience members to use the chat today, not only to say hello, but to join us in acknowledging the country that you are on. While I'm speaking of chat, I'd like to encourage everybody in the session to really use the chat feature to communicate throughout the forum. So we all know that video conferencing has been an amazing tool to help keep us connected and even broadened our networks over the last couple of years. But we also recognise it can be really difficult to stay engaged in this two-dimensional format. So please do make use of the chat to interact with our speakers and your fellow attendees. And just a reminder to check your intended audience by clicking on the blue button above the chat field. You can direct your messages directly to the host and speakers or to everyone, so that will go out to everyone in the audience. There's also the Q&A function within Zoom, so you're more than welcome to use that to ask any direct questions of our speakers today. They may take the opportunity to respond to your question via a typed response, or they may use it during the open discussions, or we may use your question, sorry, during the open discussion sessions of the agenda today. So if you have your questions, please do send them through. So now that I've done, I've got one more piece of housekeeping to do before I introduce our first guest today. So to bring in as much interaction with the audience as we can, we will be running a number of polls throughout the forum, both using the Zoom poll and as well as Mentimeter, which you might have been familiar with. So if you're comfortable to do so, please do get involved and share your answers and feedback through those questions, because it's really valuable for us and hopefully keeps you engaged throughout the day. So I'm actually going to kick off our very first poll. So let me just launch that. There we go. Oh, it says day 2. Never mind. That's my first thing. Day 2. We'll pretend that says day 1. So there's 2 questions there under the Getting to Know You banner. We've asked, what is your primary discipline and also what type of role you're in? I do apologise. Zoom only gives me 10 options for primary discipline, so I had to group a couple of them there. I recognise they are separate disciplines, but it was the best I could do with the 10 fields I have in the poll question. So I can see some answers coming through. Thank you. Tahl, can you see the responses or do I have to share them? Oh, no, I have to share them. I see the thing now. So I'll give that just a little bit longer. See any more responses coming through. And my dog's snoring very loudly today. I do apologise for that. I'll try and kick him in a second. That's coming through on the audio. Okay, so I realise it's going through day 1 and day 2 now, so I'm just going to end the poll and we'll see what we've got in the responses. Learning all sorts of things here. Here we go, share results. So day 1, I'm assuming it's going to be the same as 2. So we've got obviously a big contingent of people coming from environmental or sustainability or sustainable development. Education, very strong as well. And then we have a lot of educators in the session today and a mix, no students. That's a shame to see. We didn't see any students coming through, unfortunately. All right, I'll promise I'll get the polls working better tomorrow for the intro one. So apologies for that one. We'll stop sharing. Okay, so I'll be back at the end of the session today to wrap up, and we'll also be asking another question. So when we finish up, I'm going to tell you now, we're going to be asking what's still on your mind. Is there anything you'd like to discuss further? So keep that in your head as we do go through the session and listen to all of our amazing speakers today. So that's it from me. It's now my absolute pleasure to introduce Professor John Thwaites. John is the chair of SDSN Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific, as well as the Global SDSN Association. John chairs the Monash Sustainable Development Institute and Climate Works Australia. So very busy there, John. Thank you so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Rhiannon, and welcome everyone to what I think will be an excellent forum. Could I also start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I'm coming from, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders. I think this is a really appropriate time for us to be looking at the role of higher education in implementing the SDGs. First, because higher education does have such a significant role to play if we're going to succeed. Without higher education, I don't think there's any chance of implementing the goals. We know that higher education is vital for the individuals, our students, if they're going to develop personally. We know it's vital for countries and cities, but probably more importantly, the role of higher education is building capacity about sustainable development and also helping young people and the whole community come to solutions to those really big sustainable development challenges. We now know that we've only got 8 years left before 2030, and there's a big task ahead of us. A number of the goals are being implemented reasonably well, and yet in others we're a long way from achieving our 2030 targets. And if we look at where we are now in the midst of the COVID pandemic, major global health challenges, huge challenges of inequality, and with the major global challenge of climate change all needing to be addressed, I think now's a good time to really consider, well, what should higher education be doing to accelerate our implementation of the goals? It's also really important that this workshop, this forum, is being coordinated by 3 networks, the UNSDSN, ACS and PRIME. And I believe it's really important to acknowledge that networks have a critical role if we're going to meet these big challenges. They're bringing together universities from around the country and around the region around this big common problem we've got. I'm the chair of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network for Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific. And that's a network of more than 40 universities and knowledge institutions in our region dedicated to achieving the goals. But importantly, we're part of a bigger global network of more than 1,300 universities. And together we can do so much more than we can do on our own. And so by learning from each other, as we're going to do in this forum, by collaborating on joint projects, it's much more likely that we're going to be able to accelerate achievement of the goals. So I'm looking forward to an excellent couple of days, and I'm certainly confident that this will make a real difference in implementation of the goals. I'd now like to hand over to Tahl Kestin, who's going to talk in more detail about what this forum is going to achieve. Tahl.
Thank you very much, John, for a great introduction. And really, we don't need the slide just yet. Great. So I'm here on behalf of my co-organisers, Rhi, who you've met already, and Belinda Gibbons, who is the outgoing chair or coordinator of PRME Australia New Zealand, who we'll meet later on in the forum, to talk a little bit about the why we're doing this forum, what it will cover, and maybe who was involved in helping do this. So firstly, John gave a really great introduction about why the higher education sector is so important for the SDGs. And because we really need everyone on board to achieve the SDGs throughout, regardless of what profession, regardless of what they do in life, everyone has a role. And the higher education sector, as the premier professional development and lifelong learning sector, has an enormous potential to help upskill the whole population around doing this. So what we're really calling for is for universities to make sure the kinds of skills, knowledge, and mindsets that students need to be able to solve these complex sustainable development challenges are incorporated into the learning of all students. So this is what we mean by mainstreaming. And it's actually not easy, as I think a lot of you know. There's a lot of different things that it covers. There's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of amazing work that's already happening in this area and has been happening for a long time, but I feel like there's really an acceleration at the moment. And so what we wanted to do with this forum is to find out what's happening in our region. So see what different institutions are doing, share some really inspiring examples to help others who are thinking, what can they do in this area? And there's also a lot of really interesting innovations happening around education and programs. So really just to share things to inspire other people, and also to discuss some of the challenges that people are facing and what are some of the solutions. So really, how can we help accelerate and scale up action in this area? So we have a range of sessions over the next 3 days, and now might be a good time to share the slide, Rhi. Thank you. Going from really sector scale and institutional scale to disciplines to program specific to actually what you do in the classroom. So it's really covering a range of scales and a range of topics. We're going to start today with a session on institutional approaches just after I finish. And then also look at really where we are now in terms of the global context of work in this area. Tomorrow we'll talk a bit more about networks and cross-university collaborations and what their role is. And also a session on how you implement innovative educational programs, which a lot of education for the SDGs seems to be very important to be doing things like interdisciplinary education, action-based activities. And so there's a really interesting session sharing how these things are done. And then in the final day, we'll zoom in on a particular topic, which is very topical at the moment, around climate change and how we integrate that into learning and teaching. So we hope you'll be able to join us for a lot of this session, hopefully all 3 days. We've got some really amazing examples from 20 institutions in the area, in the region. So I'm really excited about it. And just before we move on to the first session, I want to also thank all the people who've helped us make this possibility, in particular our advisory group. And you'll meet quite a few of them as they're helping us chair quite a few of the sessions. So in particular, Annetta Boss from Monash University, Usha Iyaraniga from RMIT University, Kristen Mackenzie-Shoulders from Bond University, Thelma Rahman from Macquarie University, and Jeannie Ria from Victoria University. And Jeannie, who's the Associate Professor at the College of Arts and Education and a long-time Education for Sustainable Development practitioner at Victoria University, will be chairing the first session, and I will pass on to her now. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Tahl. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of this regional forum, and congratulations to the organisers for bringing us all together. I can see at the moment there's 77 of us on this forum, so that's fantastic. As Tahl said, my name's Jeannie Ray, and I've been working in educating for environmental and social sustainability and justice for many decades. Don't really want to think just how many. both in formal education and in the community and labour sectors, mainly in and around Melbourne, but also internationally. I wish to begin by acknowledging land, and I'm joining you today from the lands of the Boonwurrung of the Kulin Nations, and sovereignty has never been ceded. I recognise that this land is a place of age-old ceremonies and of celebration, initiation and renewal, and that Kulin people's living culture has a unique role in the life of this region. And as we share our knowledge practices today, may we pay respect to the deep knowledge embedded within Aboriginal community and their ownership of country. I pay respect to elders past and present and to emerging leaders, and also respect to other First Peoples joining today's forum. First Peoples have been custodians and protectors of land, caring and advocating for the well-being of people, of place and the planet for millennia. Before moving on, I'm going to reiterate Rhiannon and Tahl's advice to encourage you to share in chat for comments, feedbacks, links, as well as questions. Use the Q&A as well for questions, as Rhiannon said. I'll keep watching these, and Rhiannon will keep track as well, and also use raise hands. So everything that's possible to use to communicate, please do so. We want this to be an interactive session as we do throughout the forum. And I do remember from the last forum we held and talking to colleagues back at the university, I noticed one of my colleagues, Chitra's just said hello in chat there too. People got a lot out of the forum, but what they also did was use the opportunity to read in the chat, listen to people who they like the sound of and make those connections, and that has also contributed to expanding and deepening our network. So the aim of this session is to share examples of how institutions are working to incorporate education for the SDGs across the curriculum of the whole university. The session is going to explore the commonalities, the differences, the learnings around how these programs were initiated, what support they require, and other success factors. Significant challenges, how they're being overcome, maybe also how we're having trouble with them, the roles of top-down versus bottom-up actions, and of course, future plans. Much to cover, so we need to start our conversation. My most recent experience over the past 2 years at VU, Victoria University, has been working on a University Council and senior leadership endorsed whole of university commitment that, and I'll quote, "In all that we do in our research, our teaching and on our campuses and in our communities, we work to improve the health and well-being of our local and global communities and the planet that we share." We're currently assessing the progress that we've made, and I may mention some of our learnings during the discussion today and over the next couple of days. Victoria University's new 5-year strategic plan commits us towards demonstrated excellence in Indigenous-led cultural, social and climate solutions. Our key driver, one of our 5 key drivers, protecting country, is explicit in stating our responsibility is to respect and listen to Indigenous voices and standpoints, upholding and privileging self-determination, sovereignty and authority, and that at every opportunity we should address the UN SDGs. So with that experience, it is with much enthusiasm that I introduce our keynote speaker. Professor Kerrie Wilson commenced as Pro-Vice-Chancellor at the Queensland University of Technology in Sustainable Strategy just a year ago, when QUT started a 5-year project to embed sustainability across the university, I understand, but also in the undergraduate degrees, using the SDGs as a guiding framework. Kerrie will outline the work that she and her colleagues have been doing and discuss QUT's approach. So Kerrie will talk to us for 10 minutes, and we'll have a couple of questions at the end, and then we'll go on to listen to our other panellists as well. Thanks very much, Kerrie, and I understand you've got some slides and I think Rhiannon's going to post them for you.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. I can post my slides if that's suitable for you, Rhiannon, so I'll just do that now. But as Jeannie said, I'm Kerrie Wilson, Pro Vice-Chancellor Sustainability Strategy at QUT, and also a research professor in biology and environmental science at QUT. And I'll start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where QUT now stands, and that's the Turrbal and the Yagara people. So it's fantastic to be part of this session. QUT is at the start of roughly start of a journey, and we're sharing what we're doing today in the spirit of learning from you all, and also hopefully there might be tidbits that you can learn from us as we go on this journey. So I'll just share my screen. Let's get that working. And if Jeannie smiles at me, I'm going to know it's all okay. It's perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so I'll just move to the next one now, actually. Oh, in theory, there we go. So Jeannie had made reference to top-down versus bottom-up commitments and all other models in between. At QUT, we've also taken the university-wide commitment. And when we revised our university strategic plan in 2019, sustainability and the environment was made one of QUT's 7 strategic priorities. And this led to the development of QUT's Sustainability Action Plan, which outlines the university's plans across 13 key areas, ranging from waste to energy to transportation, but also to education and research. And it's the education one, obviously, that I'll focus on today. It also led to the leadership position that I hold at present, the PVC role. And that role was designed to really celebrate and catalyse and create connections across the university on all things sustainability and the environment. So here's a one-page summary of our sustainability strategy, which is a multi-page document. I'd like to be able to send people just a quick visual overview of that. But I think importantly, there's some key principles or our approach that sits behind those things. I won't focus on those today, but they are also really important for the sustainability agenda around transparency, active engagement, and a sense of purpose. We have 4 focus areas and for the sustainability strategy, and that's around embedding sustainability in all of our plans and policies and all those great documents that universities write to grow our research in this space so that we can contribute actively to solutions. Reducing the environmental footprint of our campuses, which are often mini suburbs, and also embedding sustainability into all of our undergraduate offerings. And just to kind of step back, and there was some lovely exchange in the chat with students, part-time and full-time students before. But I think our sense of purpose always goes back to what do the students want? What are they seeking? And this is a recent Times Higher Education survey of 2,000 students, and some of the headline results were that 80% of those students that completed the survey viewed that it was important to be a sustainable citizen. Surprised it wasn't 100%, but 80% is pretty high. And a similar proportion said that universities have an important role to play in achieving the SDGs, and that really reflects the comments that John made right at the beginning. So how do we start? How did QUT start? First of all, this is for the embedding in the curriculum project. First of all, we have what's called a real world learning vision at QUT, and sustainability was included in that kind of headline vision for the QUT learner experience. And that's really important because as new courses are developed and courses are reviewed, they need to reference to and demonstrate that they're speaking to these priority areas. And the second kind of component of this, kind of a top-down approach at this point, was to allow our curriculum software to keep track of how sustainability is being embedded in each of the courses. So, but beyond the vision and the systems and the processes in order to achieve this, there also needs to be a long-term plan that sits behind it. And that's the plan that Jeannie referred to at the beginning. And it's she made reference to it being a 5-year plan. And we've had some feedback saying, 5 years, why would you take so long to do something that we really want to see done now? And I guess we're really mindful that we want this to be a genuine embedding process. And we don't want it to be a tick the box exercise. So we've made it 5 years so that as all courses at QUT come up for review and revision and new proposals are put forward, there's a substantial amount of time working with those courses in course developers and academics to drive this embedding process. Now we're using the SDGs as a framework, again, kind of referencing John's comments at the beginning, because the SDGs provide that breadth that we can be inclusive across all of the university disciplines and subject areas, and every academic, every tutor at QUT has a role to play with this project as well. So I guess the key thing to mention there is that there's a lot of I guess autonomy for the faculties, the individual faculties and discipline areas to embed sustainability in a way that's really cognizant with their approaches and their areas as well. So as you can imagine, at bold projects such as this, such as the ones that other institutions represented here today and people in the audience are undertaken, takes a lot of collaboration and consultation. So we have all 5 faculties at QUT involved in this. I chair a working group that also involves the education portfolio. One of my colleagues, Deanna Meth, will join the panel afterwards and her role of supporting academics in order to deliver on this project also. And we're currently mapping our current courses, or actually we've undertaken that already, kind of just a baseline. Where are we at with this project already? And we've made quite a lot of progress already, which is delightful, but there's still a lot to do, and we have that time, as I said. So I'm mindful of time, and I guess without going into too much detail around the specifics and the nuts and bolts of the processes that we're using, I wanted to share some reflections on our tips in case it's helpful for other people on what we've learned so far. And first of all is that support from senior leadership. Our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Margaret Shield, is a strong advocate for this area, a chemist herself, a scientific leader, and she's provides strong endorsement of this project. We have, as we pointed out, that long-term commitment and plan in order to deliver on this project. We've created room for a shared understanding of what sustainability is at QUT, but we've also created opportunities for debate and for students to share their views. And they are the change agents of the future, and 2030 is approaching quickly, so they'll be leading the way. We, as I mentioned before, we have that really tight connection with that curriculum review process, and also this is a priority area for the university. We are having an amazing amount of success with linking the portfolios of education research and operational activities through this project. That's been quite I guess rewarding to see the opportunities for collaboration across professional and academic staff teams between our facilities management and our lecturers and professors at the university. The opportunity to showcase and champion what other people do, I think, is critical. This is a project that I am notionally have carriage of, but there are so many people across the university that have ownership of that project, and that's absolutely by design. There is I guess, the importance of supporting our colleagues in what they're doing and sharing their ideas. And the final point there is we're linking our educational offerings to real world problems and solutions. And that's important for a university whose tagline is the university for the real world. But I think it's important for all of us to demonstrate to students why this is relevant and why this is critical for their future. So I'll just finish, Jeannie, with just 2 examples, if I may. One is the QUT Impact Labs, and the other is a really excellent collaboration with the sciences and the arts. So the Impact Labs course is one of 4 units introduced into the QUT Bachelor of Design in 2019. Excitingly, it's just been recognised by winning the 2021 Reimagine Education Global Education Award at the Wharton QS. I'm reading here because I don't want to get it wrong. Reimagine Education Awards. And what this course enables is for QUT design students to complete these labs that cover those core elements that I referenced right at the beginning around place and people, planet and purpose. That's the core underpinnings of it. They're given project briefs and project themes to address. And this year they collaborated with RMIT, which is a leading design company, to design the university campus of the future. There's been so much disruption, change. What is the ideal university campus? And the students then had the opportunity to showcase this not only to our colleagues, our industry partners, but also to the whole of the university using our interactive display at QUT called the Cube. And simultaneously, we're undergoing our campus review. And so the students' ideas were able to feed into our own facilities management planning, and this collaboration is ongoing. The second example, and I'll finish with this one, is a project called Creativity in a Time of Climate Change. And this is a project undertaken by the QUT Fine Arts students in a unit called Situated Creative Practice. My colleague Keith Armstrong, who's an academic and an artist, led this project, and he asked his students as part of this unit to respond to the climate and ecological crisis by imagining and presenting possibilities for the next era of human history. And so this is an incredible course or unit where the students came from creative writing, dance, drama, music, technical production and the visual arts, and they undertook artworks and installations and performances, and this is the connection to the sciences, at our ecological research facility out at Sanford, a beautiful property that QUT conducts research at. And so here we have 2 students. This is Grace White and Kate Ooting. They performed an immersive installation and dance piece called Tread Lightly out at Sanford. And they're wearing costumes designed by Chloe McMahon. And this also includes a fungi installation. So you can see, this incredible immersion and collaboration here across disciplines, across the arts and the sciences more broadly, integrating with our facilities management team that run the ecological research facility, and just really creating an opportunity for discussion, collaboration and conversation at QUT in a way that I guess I hadn't imagined was possible. Just a fantastic example of a unit for these students to undertake in the creative arts. So there are my 2 examples. I hope you got a sense of my excitement for these 2, but there are many others I could have included. And hopefully they provide a little bit of a conversation starter for the panel as well, Jeannie. So that's my idea of throwing those in there. And that's it from me. I really welcome feedback. If you see something that QUT is doing and you think, we've been there, be careful, this might be a better direction, love to hear from you. If you would like more details about what we're doing, I can share those details with you, share our plans and share our strategies. We're very open and willing to do so. This is not a space that I think universities should be competing in. This is a space where we all need to collaborate. So thank you very much. And that's all from me, Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Kerrie. Do you want to take down your slides? Yeah, thank you so much. And I think your point about that we're in this to share and collaborate, and what I've always found fabulous about any of the forums and meetings and so on that we've had across these networks is just that spirit of collaboration and sharing, which indeed is part of the very point of the sort of world that we're trying to create. I really loved your 8 tips. I think we could just spend, I was thinking we could spend a day each on each tip and compare notes, but we don't have the time to do that. But I did say that people could ask questions, and I actually do have a question for you, Kerrie, from Joe McCormack, who's asking what mapping tool you've used to map the SDGs. She's asking she's from Griffiths Health Sciences and Social Work, and they've used a tool from the University of Edinburgh. Just interested in what you've been doing at QUT.
Okay, that's a great question, and I hope I get this right, because this is really also the expertise of the education portfolio, and Deanna might want to jump in also. But what we've done is we've taken the Times Higher Education impact ranking keywords, very comprehensive, amazing list of keywords, and we've searched within the course and unit titles and also the blurbs for our units for those keywords, and did some kind of human error checking as a result of that, and then mapped that using Course Loop as well. So we've got a sense of where the dominant keywords, the sustainability, environment, where energy, where they're being picked up within our units. But then we all have also a finer filter using this really diverse set of keywords for every SDG that's being developed by the Times Higher Education impact ranking system. And there's benefits. I'm predominantly a research professor at QUT, and there's benefits of creating that synergy between how we're looking at research and how we're looking at education, if we're going to continue to have education that is at the cutting, demonstrating the cutting edge of research also. So there's some benefits there. There's also, I guess, an opportunity, it creates an opportunity for conversation. So if we, in our review of the units, say, well, this course doesn't capture anything to do with sustainability as far as we can tell, it gives the academic an opportunity to reflect on the words that they're using and to describe their course and almost update that language as well. But it also enables us to say, well, these words just aren't relevant in this context. So it's a combination of automatic searching and also human appraisal, I guess. I hope that answers your question, and I'm sure Deanna will jump in. Thanks, Joe. Okay, I probably spoke too long, sorry.
Thanks so much, Kerrie. Made me start thinking about the mapping way that we did it at my place too. I think we could put it all together, would be another useful exercise for us. Before I let you go though, could I just ask a question, just one particular question that came on the chat from Usha Inga Reiniger, relevant to your point about collaboration. She says, this was great, thanks. I'm interested to understand, how do you encourage your academics to collaborate with each other? A big question to finish on, but just a short point.
Yeah, actually, one thing that I've, oh, my Zoom's gone a bit blurry. Anyway, one thing that I've been hesitant to do is to set up incentives such as, prizes and awards for collaboration and things like that. A QUT has a really strong culture of interdisciplinary collaboration anyhow. So we have this, I guess you have people that don't look like everyone else in their discipline area sitting in a faculty or a school, but because their focus area or their impact agenda is really relevant to that area. So we have I guess a much more organic structuring of the university, in my view, at the school level. And so there's a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration underway already. I guess to summarize that, QUT is not structured in silos to start out with. So collaboration is happening. There are incentives for cross faculty and cross school course development also. And I guess this is also in the spirit of current academic curriculum development that we have at QUT to facilitate those collaborations also. So I guess, you know, the groundwork's already been laid for me in some way, and I'm not going to go down the line of prize awards for doing something that we're already doing really well. So that's the approach I'm taking.
Thank you so much, Kerrie. I think that is putting it together. It's both the structural and the cultural, and using what the ways that are already there to then add what your project or the university's project can do with it. And I think some of those themes of working with all the wonderful things we already have to taking them to the next step and applying them to our sustainability projects seems pretty much like the way that you're going and others are reporting as well. So, okay, Kerrie, I know we have to, you have to leave us now, and that your colleague, Dr. Deanna Meth, is going to join us for the panel later on. So thank you ever so much for being able to join us today, and great insights, and all the best with QUT's fabulous project.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We really grateful for the opportunity to speak, and you're in good hands on the panel with Deanna. She is an expert in this area. So thank you, and I'll say goodbye.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's now move to hear from our 4 panellists before we then open up to the Q&A. I'm going to invite each of them to make an opening statement of about 5 minutes. And what I'll, just for the panellists' benefit, I'll put a private note in chat just to say when you've got a minute to go, if you're just flicking your eyes that way, because otherwise I know 5 minutes one can often start to get pretty enthusiastic. It's a way of doing it. So let's just get on with it though. And do keep everyone adding questions in and chatting. Chatting's an interactive activity. But let me first introduce Dr. Nicole Graham, who's an Associate Professor and Associate Dean of Education at the University of Sydney Law School. And Nicole's going to speak to us about a project on integrating climate change into the core curriculum of the professional law programs. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Jeannie, and thank you very much to the organisers of this event for allowing me to speak today. First, I'd like to acknowledge the country I'm speaking to from in the local language, Ninari Nyalawanyan Māori Bujari Gari Nuradau. So I'm speaking to you from Gadi country in Sydney. And I pay my respects to the knowledge of country and the elders past, present and emerging. So Sydney University has also a sustainability strategy, as several universities do have, and I just wanted to start by framing what I'm going to say in that context. So strategy 4 of Sydney University's sustainability strategy is to increase our capacity for sustainability education across the university. And the key takeaways from this strategy 4 is that we would like to provide our students with new opportunities across all faculties and schools for a distinctive and holistic education as sustainability leaders. We're going to do this by increasing the access that students have to study beyond their home discipline. Very specifically, what we're aiming to do is to embed sustainability themes and practices into the curricula across all disciplines. And I'm going to come back to this across all disciplines in a moment. And one of the ways that we wish to do this is to integrate multidisciplinary sustainability knowledge into the graduate attributes that apply to all award courses at the university. Now, at the end of 2021, the University of Sydney Academic Board approved the introduction of a new sustainability major. So that sustainability major means that a student can graduate with their degree in whatever home discipline and have a major in sustainability. There was a a very interesting and engaging process in the development of what constitutes that major, and there was also the development of a minor in sustainability. So that is really exciting, and I have to say that coming from the law discipline, I had a bittersweet experience of that, of being part of that team in developing that sustainability major, because I knew that the students in my discipline, in the law discipline, would only have access to a sustainability major if they approached it from their home discipline. And for those of you who don't know, you cannot study law in the University of Sydney as an undergraduate. You have to enrol in a combined degree, so science and law, or arts and law, or economics and law, and so on. So you might have access to the sustainability major in your first degree, so your Bachelor of Arts, your Bachelor of Science, but you will not access it in the law degree. Why? Because the Bachelor of Laws and the Juris Doctor, the JD, so there are two professional law programs, the curriculum in those two professional law programs are not in our control. The university and the law school don't control that curriculum. It is prescribed externally by the accrediting body. So in New South Wales, of which Sydney is the capital, the LPAB, the Legal Professional Admission Board, determines a core curriculum for us. And our core curriculum is very, very large. So 18 of our 24 subjects, sorry, I think it's even higher than that, are compulsory subjects. The students have very little wriggle room, and that core curriculum is dominated by public and private law subjects. Now, this means that for students at Sydney University studying a law degree today, any exposure they have to the sustainability concepts, the SDGs, would be either through their home discipline or imposed by an accrediting body. Now, I noticed in the chat that someone referred to the accrediting bodies in relation to accounting. The accrediting bodies in Australia and in New South Wales, to my knowledge, do not require any literacy or embedding of sustainability SDGs in our curriculum. And so what does this mean? It means that for me, as the Associate Dean Education, I feel a strong and acute sense of responsibility to engage in a curriculum review of our core curriculum, which is enormous, to see whether and how it is possible to embed the SDGs in it. Why do I think this is important if indeed the students might have access to the sustainability major in their home degree? Well, firstly, because our JD students don't do a combined degree, a JD is a standalone degree. Secondly, because legal education, as you would expect, reproduces the exact knowledge and skills that are used in legal practice and in policy development. You may know that Sydney University Law School graduates are overrepresented in the Parliament of Australia, the parliaments of various states and territories, and on courts of all levels. So if climate change is accompanied by an increase in intensification of food, water and energy security, then that means that organised human society will need to replace the legal protections for individual rights and freedoms with a legal priority for community at a bigger scale, for care and relationality. That's a fundamental rethink of our legal categories. So our legal categories, the kind of concepts we deal with in my discipline is a right, entitlement, individualism, autonomous individuals, boundaries, exclusion, fault, limited liability. Now, these are concepts in private law, and the way they are practiced basically means that we are seeing disputes over land use and natural resources that are on the rise because boundaries are migrating, how we understand damage and harm is changing, what we think risk is different, what we think foreseeability is different, what we think is reasonable, what we think is vulnerable. All of these concepts on which law is based are moving. And what that means is that legal education is going to have to change if we are overcoming, if we hope to overcome, the institutional barriers to climate change adaptation. So basically, what I hope to just finish off by saying is that we're at the start of a curriculum review at Sydney Law School of its core curriculum, and that we do hope to be able to engage with this literature and research in higher education generally and embedding SDGs, but that we have external constraints imposed on us. We don't have a lot of wriggle room in terms of our content. And we certainly also face, in addition to the external constraints, a very conservative culture academically in law as a discipline. And so the members of the Curriculum Review Committee, who are drawn from Sydney Law School, are themselves eminent public and private lawyers whose reputations have been developed by reproducing and developing existing legal doctrine and existing legal concepts and frameworks. And whilst, of course, there is exciting and innovative research in law, it very much is framed usually within the existing paradigm that exists, which is anthropocentric, by which I mean human-centred. And so to go back to my earlier point, if the University of Sydney has a sustainability strategy that wishes to expose all of our students across all of our disciplines to the SDGs, then the challenge for the law school will be how to do that in the face of external constraints from the accrediting bodies and in the face of internal limitations of the expectations and knowledge of our all of them wonderful teachers and researchers in the law school. So that's how I'd like to frame some of the challenges in this space in my discipline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And indeed, you have opened up the incredibly, I think, difficult and challenging and provocative reality that looking for collaboration or looking for the notion of adding sustainability or integrating sustainability in the curriculum is not necessarily a benign activity. It is actually taking on the fundamentals. And I think your point about we're going to actually deal with climate change adaptation, to use your words, in the law, this does actually mean looking at fundamentals. And yeah, I would dare to suggest that that is the case across many other disciplinary areas, and there is a conservative culture and power embedded in those areas, in the professions, and law, of course, epitomises it because, as you said, because of the power of law and how that translates into our parliaments as well. So thanks, Nicole, for opening up the big questions, the big issues, the elephant in the room in many ways, but the accredited courses issue, and also that we are actually challenging big things and traditional ways that we've done at teaching and reproducing the professions. So thanks very much for that. Let's move on and give Felix, Dr. Felix Hewitt a go. He's the Associate Professor of Engineering Management and Academic Specialist in the Department of Infrastructure Engineering at the University of Melbourne. And Felix wants to address the integration of sustainability into university curricula. Thanks, Felix.
Thank you, Jeannie. So good afternoon. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So first of all, I'd like to just give a picture of our university's overall strategy, and then dive a bit into talking about what we are doing in the engineering and IT faculty in terms of embedding sustainability in our curriculum. Now, the university's overall strategy is embedded in our sustainability plan, and we do have quite detailed goals, both high levels and detailed goals for achieving sustainability, such as achieving carbon neutrality by 2025. The plan also involves the setup and a review of meaningful indicators. That's very important towards achieving embedding sustainability in our actions. Okay, so this overall is a roadmap and a coordinated approach to achieve carbon neutrality and embedding sustainability, and is supported by our three pillars of teaching and learning, research, and engagement. So to this effect, the university has actually appointed 4 sustainability fellows in 2019 to oversee the implementation across all the faculties in the university. So teaching and learning is an important pillar that supports the advancement of the plan. So at both university and faculty levels. So at the university level, the Chancellery has identified 50 subjects that have substantial sustainability components, and using this as a start point to actually to drive sustainability across the university. So also at the university level, in the teaching learning area, there is being established a new program for sustainability leadership training for both staff and students, and some of the staff and students will be selected for this. So at the engineering faculty level, it's also a bit of a big task to embed sustainability, and we actually look at how we can embed the 17 SDGs in our curriculum in all our subjects, and with the aim of starting with one department. Okay, and then once we have we have gained some headway with this department, we will use this as an example to roll across to the rest of the departments in the engineering and IT faculty. So we started off with one of the departments, that is the infrastructure engineering department. So what we did was to ask, first of all, to get some awareness and thinking of academics to think about the embedding SDG, get them to reflect how they can think about getting some of the goals, to reflect the goals into their subject content. Okay, so to do that within our department, first of all, we appoint a core group of champions. Okay, just 3 or 4 people who will drive the SDG implementation in the department. So what this group of people did, we first checked the subjects in the handbook, the subject content in the handbook against the SDG goals and indicators. Okay, and then we try to see if there's some alignment, and then we contact the subject coordinators for a discussion, to initiate the discussion. Okay, it's actually quite time consuming, and we had to do this over a period of time. But once we got into got the ball rolling, we started discussion about how how the subject content can be aligned. Naturally, some of the subjects will fit better than others. So, but nothing is perfect. And we basically asked the subject coordinators to think about how their subject content is aligned with the SDG goals. So we just asked them to rank in terms of whether it's there's a low level alignment or a high level of alignment, or there's somewhere in between the mid-level alignment. So this is done by the subject coordinators, and from there we initiate a discussion about how perhaps certain content can be made to align with the SDG. So content meaning the teaching materials as well as the assessment. So it may be difficult for some subjects like engineering, mathematics, how this to align with the SDG. But there are other subjects that are more applied and discipline specific, like for example structural design. You can actually think about how you select the methods or the effects of your final design on the stakeholders. So other subjects like engineering materials, selection of materials can actually be modified to align with the SDG. There are other subjects such as sustainable infrastructure engineering. That's where they would naturally be more aligned with the SDGs. So that's a bit about what we are doing. So the goal is basically to final aim is actually to have the subject coordinators, like academics, try to embed the SDG in their subject content, and then perhaps change handbook officially. So while we are doing that, at the same time, the research platforms are also advancing in the same direction. This is important, especially when we need to embed our research in our teaching. It's important that the students come to university to learn, whereas at the same time they also want to learn about the cutting-edge research that we do. So as part of inculcating sustainability in our graduates, we would like our students not just to learn about sustainability and pass exams related to sustainability. Students are also encouraged to have to participate in activities with involving sustainability outside of classroom. So, for example, the case competitions that we organize for students is one example where we try to incorporate sustainability in the team as well.
Thank you.
Yep. So lastly, maybe just one lastly. So this overall strategy is not just we need to monitor it and to renew it as part of the overall strategy. And the basic aim of all this is to build meaningful actions through all our stakeholders, not just passing on knowledge, but through actions and behaviors, and for our graduates to bring it to the wider community. So we have to actually consciously do it with our daily activities as well. So thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Felix.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of having making a commitment and then having, I suppose, piloting, starting with what may be the easiest or where people are really keen to get started, is an approach which is taken in many cases, and then as a way of then bringing more people on board and wanting to be part of the new thing instead of concerned about another lot of workload, which is, I know, an issue that's came up at my place too. But I thought one point you made, which I think is worth adding to the discussion as well, is you did say it's a very time-consuming process. And I think this is something that needs to be recognised too, that actually making quite fundamental change, to pick up Nicole's earlier comment too, does actually mean lots of talk, lots of talking with stakeholders, talking with students, aligning with research, aligning with outside partners, inside partners. There's a lot within this, rather than just saying, hey, we can make some quick changes here and put in the right words and have a SDG focused assessment piece. It's asking for a lot more than that. So thanks very much for getting a whole lot of those issues on the board for our discussion this afternoon as well. I'm going to now, though, move on to introduce Dr. Jeannie Underwood, who's the Associate Dean of Fashion and Textiles Technology in the School of Fashion and Textiles at RMIT University. And Jeannie's going to talk to us about reimagining fashion higher education through the SDGs. You sort of had that picture of those design students at Sydney Uni taking the jump on you there, but I'll throw it over to you now, Jeannie.
No, thank you. And I must say, it's such a rich conversation. So I feel very honoured to be part of this panel. So thank you. And I too would like to firstly acknowledge the Wurrung people of the Kulin Nations of where I am today, so at RMIT University. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did in the School of Fashion and Textiles at RMIT. We are a school that works across multiple disciplines, so design, enterprise and technology. And in 2018, we had the opportunity to really reimagine our curriculum and to think about how we prepare our graduates for the fashion and textile industry. So this led us in late 2018 to undertake a major curriculum design project within the school. And effectively, we created a new suite of degrees in fashion design, sustainable innovation, which is around technology, fashion enterprise, and textile design. So these suite of, some of them were renewed courses, some of them were new courses, was really about that idea that's being talked a lot about already around being really flexible, integrated learning. That idea that a student could take a minor in a different area, we would have courses where we could have the whole cohort of multiple disciplines coming together. So central to our curriculum design project has been embedding the Sustainable Development Goals. But it has also been, and that's really about taking a very global perspective to the fashion and textile industry and looking at how do we bring disciplines together to work. But we've also looked at a local level. So particularly in terms of the university's reconciliation plan, how could we actually implement that and how do we actually start to activate that? So it's very much about that sort of idea of looking at global perspectives and local perspectives. In 2019, we had the luxury of time, and I think that is an important thing to be able to look at the design of that curriculum, to design these new courses. And then in 2020, we commenced delivery. Why we've done this is really, I probably don't need to talk too much about the fashion and textile industry. We talk often that by 2030, significant change is needed. And for us, that's about shifting a supply chain that's been very much around a linear process and very much siloed in terms of disciplines to circularity. And as soon as you start to talk about circularity, you need to have a very multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach. So our school, if we're to be preparing graduates for that future, we need to be doing that ourselves. We also sort of recognize that, part of that is collaboration. When we're looking at environmental, social, ethical practices within the industry, again, we need to look at how does that cooperation work? And what does it mean as a university that's wanting to be global? We have a whole host of students who are international, who are coming and bringing different perspectives. So how do we connect that up? So that's where for us, the SDGs really became our foundation. So what have we done with the SDGs? It's one thing to say, hey, we're embedding them into our courses. But what we're really looking at is the ways in which we might embed it. And I think that's where working at a school level, I think in that context of an institutional change, that middle level allows us to have a deep dive into specific courses and teaching staff and work closely with them, but also to connect up to the university policies and those broader strategic changes. Some of the things we've done is looking at the SDGs being introduced to all first years in a shared course, which is really around just building understanding and awareness. We've also moved into then using the SDGs within courses as a means or a method to analyse the supply chain of fashion and textiles. It's also being used by students to seek out solutions. How can a small incremental change in a supply chain have a profound effect? Or what are the consequences of those changes? And I guess lastly, we've also started to realise that the use of the SDGs become really critical for staff as a means of reflection on what they're teaching and the way in which they're teaching, that shared language. So bringing all of that together. So far, it's been incredibly positive. The students have really received it. I think something for our discussion as we move into that phase is really around thinking about how we support staff, the professional development needed for staff. We undertook a series of workshops, but it needs to be ongoing and it needs to be iterative. So that's probably enough from me at the moment. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jeannie. I think it really does start to raise some of the complexities, including that you do that staff development. So I'm glad you've added that one to the talk, but also the student diversity issue too. And indeed that, and having international students and lots of international students in many of these courses and in our universities, and indeed them bringing particular ways of looking at the SDGs that are different than some of definitely different than some mainstream Australian approaches too. So thanks very much for that. I think it's very exciting the connections being made up through the fashion and textiles industry too. Now, noting that we really need to have a little bit of discussion of time, at least, I'll now move on to our final contributor to the panel, who is Dr. Sandeep Mysore, who's a Senior Lecturer and Research Theme Lead at Digital Sustainability Knowledge Hub. Oh, that sounds so cool, at UNSW Business School. And you're going to talk about the UNSW SDG Toolkit and Module. Thanks, Sandeep, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Jeannie, and thank you to the organizers for having me speak here today and share our experience. As Jeannie said, I'm Sandeep, and I'm a Senior Lecturer in Information Systems in the Business School. And I also do some research within our Digital Sustainability Knowledge Hub, which was recently established last year to tackle issues around sustainability from an information systems perspective. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Gamigal people, traditional custodians of the land where I'm joining from, northern beaches of Sydney. And I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that may be present here today. So our university has had a big commitment to broadening and deepening the SDGs within all aspects of the university's operation. And we've undertaken a lot of effort to embed sustainability practices across all our activities through the development of a strategic sustainability framework, like many other universities have recently undertaken. And I'm here to share a few of these activities that have been initiated under this broad framework, especially in the learning and teaching space. And I will be talking about the SDG toolkit and module that Jeannie mentioned earlier. I will reflect on these efforts both from the perspective of the creator and as well as the consumer of this resource as a teaching academic. So the university recognized the need to introduce and integrate SDG thinking among UNSW academics. This is something that the university recognized as an important capability to embed within the teaching academics and the students and the wider stakeholders. So to support this vision of embedding SDG thinking, the university set up a group to develop the SDG toolkit and module, which was completed and launched in 2020. And this was a very, it was a top-down effort, but it did elicit participation from various academics across different faculties who took charge of a different SDG to showcase and highlight. The toolkit itself is a non-prescriptive and flexible resource that aids academics to integrate SDG thinking across their educational platforms, across their courses, and to introduce students to relevant challenges around SDGs. And we have made the toolkit available as a Moodle course that students can simply enroll into and go through and complete as part of their ongoing courses. So the toolkit itself is built around 17 video modules. I've also shared a link to the playlist of these 17 videos, which I'm happy to share in chat with the wider audience. And the toolkit basically builds on each video module and introduces the SDG within the Australian context. And we felt that that was important to showcase and highlight what the SDG means within the Australian context, and what progress we are making towards achieving these SDGs within our national context. So the content of the toolkit itself is flexible enough to incorporate the needs right from an ungraded homework to major assignments. So the lecturer in charge or the course in charge can really take this resource and build whatever assignment they see fit by making use of the content embedded within these modules. The toolkit also provides specific opportunities for students to think about making micro contributions towards the attainment or achievement of the SDGs, which is, again, discipline agnostic. So it is not married to any specific discipline, and it is open to interpretation and use. The introductory video, which is built, which sort of introduces the toolkit, has now garnered over 37,000 views in the university, and it's slowly, being adopted and used by faculty members across the university. I'd like to spend a quick minute personally reflecting on the SDG toolkit, because I use this toolkit in on the courses that I teach. And I found that the toolkit was sufficiently flexible for being adapted to different use cases. For instance, I use the toolkit as an educational support resource for students who are undertaking a major assignment in my course. And in this assignment, they had to develop digital prototypes to an identified societal or organizational problem, which had a sustainable development goal implication. So students used the SDG toolkit, gained an understanding of the challenges in the Australian context, and devised prototypes that would help in achieving those SDG, help advancing those SDGs. We've also used the toolkit as a community engagement resource. For example, we've developed a gamified prototypical application to promote sustainable practices within the student community, which again builds on top of the SDG toolkit. So in this case, the SDG toolkit serves as an educational resource where students learn about the SDGs, participate in a sustainability challenge every month, and through this process, they learn more about what the progress that we are making, and what some of the issues associated with specific SDGs. So these were the two use cases that I personally developed and used, building on top of the toolkit. The couple of other related initiatives that I'd like to very quickly introduce. There is the SDG module. Sorry.
Wind up. We're running out of time.
I'm almost up. Yeah, sure. So the SDG module is another ancillary module, which is a more in-depth exploration of this SDG toolkit, which is more tailored towards the teaching academics, where they get a more in-depth view of what are the topics that need to be covered within each module whenever they're covering those issues within the classroom. So lastly, I would just like to very quickly mention that in order to understand the impact of these resources, we are also undertaking an SDG mapping exercise similar to other universities, where we are trying to understand the course coverage across the university, and how well and at what depth we are covering SDG related challenges within the course curriculum. So that is it from my side. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to share more of our experience and through the Q&A shortly. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you very much. And as per usual, everyone's got a lot to say, and hard to stop them in mid talking as well, despite giving warnings. But very, very valuable contributions. I've also two takeaways I've got so far from this, and is that there's a very boisterous conversation going on chat. Fantastic. And there's two, I think, themes coming out in that conversation, and indeed in the talk from the contributions from the panelists too, and from Kerrie. The issue around accrediting bodies, can be a problem. They are performing both roles. I know that because I actually do know about some of the engineering societies and accrediting bodies that have been actually the impetus. And then where there's others where there's problems, and that hiding behind it as an excuse not to act. The other one that I think starting to emerge a bit further after we started out having a lot to say about what's a good mapping tool, the conversation in the chat's now moving into the hang on, what about the critical edge there? Just mapping, just having an SDG tag there's not what we're after. I know I'm very much encouraged always to, can we just look at the heading? Can we look at the targets? Can we look at the indicators and what implicit and explicit biases there are in those as well. So it makes it a whole lot more complex. As I said, it can't be done as a quick exercise. I think that's a key one. We don't have much time left. So, and there was a question earlier about mapping that I've lost now. It's been answered, but I'm going to actually go with a key question to take around to the panelists, but I'm going to let Deanna, and Deanna Meth is a senior lecturer in design and development, I think it is, with working with Kerrie and others on the project that at QUT. And the question was one about pushback from schools and universities and externally, but I'm going to put that a different way and say, do you want to name either what a big challenge is, or what a big help, what's been really helpful in trying to move things along? So go for one or the other.
Thanks very much,
Deanna,
Jeannie.
do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeannie, and thanks to all the panellists for your great contributions. Firstly, I'd also just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which QUT stands, the Turrbal and Yagara people. Yeah, a theme that has come up consistently that I think is a great benefit is that, you know, as part of sustainability and education for sustainability, we say to our students, oh, you have to think holistically, you have to think in a systems way, but the question is, are we doing that ourselves? And I think we need to look at this holistically. And I just answered a question from Jonathan about we cannot put these things into their 17 individual compartments. And as Kerrie mentioned, you know, we need to be looking across research, teaching and operations. But also for that critical edge, I think a large error that we do is we spend a lot of time working on sustainability content, you know, the knowledge bits, but what we spend less time looking at is those actually broader capabilities, the critical capabilities, the kind of transformative pedagogies, participatory teaching approaches. So what we're trying to do is less than just ticking what content is actually being addressed, is actually looking at those kinds of pedagogies as well. We're saying sort of as part of our overall curricula and the ways in which we want to teach at QUT, what does future-focused teaching and transformative education look like? That should involve critique, that should involve kind of participatory approaches, where there's storytelling and people can have a critical say, and they can actually, yes, pull the sustainable development goals apart and actually pull the very notion of sustainable development as a theme in itself apart. And in terms of linking things, I'm not going to repeat what Kerrie said, it's the top-down, bottom-up approach that works well. But one good example is the School of Design late last year led a day-long symposium where it was on education sustainability, but it used their QUT Design Lab, their More Than Human Futures research group, and combined that with the New Economy Network meeting. So it was such a rich day. And we also had Mary Graham speaking on Indigenous Australian perspectives as well. And it was just such a rich day to pull together all of those agendas. And it made so much more sense to look at it holistically.
So when we try and do things interdisciplinary ways and trying to push it even further to a transdisciplinary approaches, when we look across all the other areas of the university, and indeed outside the university, that's when we start to have to have a critical edge. And that's coming up here again in the chat that was going on too while you were talking there, Deanna. Thank you very much. So, Nicole, coming back to, you'd asked about, you'd said this is a challenge we've got. What though, on the other side of things, what's helping you make this happen?
I am encouraged. I would like to say supported, but we're not quite at that point. I am encouraged by events around climate change and legal education. So University of Queensland Law Journal recently published a special issue dedicated to legal education and climate change, to which I contributed a chapter. That's the first time that a university law journal has done a special issue on this topic. Some law journals, like Sydney Uni, refuse to do any special issues because they're above that. And there are other conferences and workshops. We're going to have one, Sydney Uni Law School, we're going to host one. at the end of the year. And what we're trying to do is to get colleagues to come in and just give examples of what they've done in tort, so what they did in criminal law or what they did in corporations law from all across the country. So just trying to build support at a grassroots level, because if we can get exemplars and models of what people are trying and how that's turning out, that will be helpful. The resistance we can expect and we do encounter, and the only way that we can cope with that is to develop a bit of a community of legal educators who engage with the scientific literature and appreciate the urgent need for this work. So that's all we've got at this stage, but I just don't know if we've got enough time to be progressing at this slow pace. I really wish that the accrediting bodies could work with universities instead of just sort of sitting separately and on high. I think that's regrettable and unhelpful.
Thanks very much, Nicole. And I think that the time imperative, of course, is critical. And when my comments before and picking up on it's time consuming to do this doesn't mean that we got time to take to do it. It's that we actually have to devote the time to it. And maybe there is something, if we could keep thinking about it over the next few days of this this forum, is to think about some of these strategies around the accrediting bodies. You've already talked to the collaboration going on amongst the law schools, amongst law scholars. Clearly a way to go, and it's what others have brought up as well. So thanks, Nicole. Jeannie, I've actually got a question of you, asking of you, which is asking what was some of the pushback from the school and university and externally?
I think the key thing is about having a conversation. It's not about, if you start with, we are going to do this and impose it on people, it's probably not going to work. So that idea of starting a conversation and trying to find some neutral space in where to do this, I think it's incredibly hard for staff who are expert in their discipline. They have that expertise, and then you're saying, and the curriculum's already crowded, and you're saying, now we want you to add this in. So that's where we had the amazing support of curriculum learning designers who actually could help us to really step back and take a more holistic approach with particular courses and how that might work. And I think that's where trying to get that full support, and that's at a grassroots level, at the top in terms of institutional commitments, and how you can sort of meet there to work it through.
Thanks, Jeannie. And the roles of the curriculum and learning designers like Deanna and so many of us, I think, have worked with who are traditionally academics, but have worked across with the designers, and indeed that message of working across and with other colleagues, with the librarians, always a source of great knowledge, but also with across professional colleagues. One of the things what I brought into my classroom late last year was our new retail procurement person who just done this fantastic new procurement policy and retail policy, and said, come and tell our students how you did that so they can go and learn to do it in their workplaces. So it's actually working with what you've got and also giving people that whoosh along that they want, and recognition that someone else was talking about as well, of being so important. Now, I've got a minute each for Felix and Sandeep to make a comment on what do you challenge or a incentive to keep acting. Sandeep?
Thanks, Jeannie. So no, I was just going to mention that in our experience, when you think about top-down efforts, for them to have a better chance of impact, it is important that whatever we create, the resources that we create, are sufficiently flexible and non-prescriptive to enable diverse interpretation of different use cases and wide-scale adoption. If we narrow down the scope of possibilities, it becomes quite difficult for someone to actually see some potential use for it. And equally important, and this is something that other speakers have alluded to, it is critical to showcase the experience of early adopters of these resources to inspire other teaching academics to imagine, creative uses of this resource. And then just finally, one final point, that it is also equally important to develop the ancillary capability of, tracking the use and impact of these resources that we create. One, of course, it is evidence of the resources and their potential impact, and two, it's always nice to know, what kind of usage these resources are having, and it also gives us opportunities to bring up future iterations of the resource which are better suited to academic needs.
Very much so indeed. Actually tracking and celebrating what we're managing to do. Felix, you get the last word.
Yes, thank you. So I think I just want to basically agree with what Jeannie said. I think it's important to have that conversation with the academics, to actually engage with the staff. It is very time consuming, like I said earlier, in our experience. What we found also is that not every one of the academics have a uniform understanding of what the SDG or sustainability is. Even just the word sustainability could mean different things to different people. So it's good to continue to have a conversation with them and engage with these academics, and that's the start point. And otherwise it won't be impactful for the faculty. Thank you.
Thanks, Felix.
Yep.
Yes, we have to bring people along with us at all times, and people have to have the opportunities to learn as well.
Yes.
Can't assume people know things they haven't had an opportunity to learn about. I'm going to finish with comment, because Tahl's going to cut me off. I say one really important learning that I've had over the last couple of years of taking a whole of university approach has been that staff in all sorts of jobs now think they have an authority and permission to act and to make it part of what they're doing. They might be in finance, they might be in teaching education, they might be in grounds. That people can now think they can think and know they have endorsement and support to raise these issues, and indeed say, I'm in this part of the university, I wonder what they're doing in nursing education about this. And so I think that's really helped with sanctioning and encouraging the conversations. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We've just touched the tip here, but thanks, Tahl. We're finished. Go back to you now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeannie. And I really do hate to cut this conversation off, because it has been really fascinating and I think could have gone on for a long time. But we do have, I think, what will be an interesting session now as well, where we get to zoom out a little bit about all these amazing things are happening. And the SDGs, I think, are really creating a catalyst to universities to look differently at what they're doing around education. But things like education for sustainability and education for sustainable development have been around for quite a long time. And for newcomers like me, it's sometimes hard to know what has already been learnt in this area, making sure that we're not reinventing the wheel and things. And so actually today we have a really great guide to help maybe situate us in where we are at the moment around this kind of area. What can we build on what we already know? And that's Emeritus Professor Geoff Scott. Geoff, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Great, great. So Geoff is Emeritus Professor of Higher Education and Sustainability at the University of Western Sydney. And he has been leading work in this space for quite a long time, and is still very active and doing some amazing things. He was Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Quality and Executive Director of Sustainability of Western Sydney Uni for a number of years. And during that time, he established the UN-endorsed Regional Centre of Expertise in Education for Sustainable Development at Western Sydney University. He writes a lot about this area, particularly around leadership for change and sustainability, including a study around what successful change leaders in education for sustainable development are doing. So a study called Turnaround Leadership for Sustainability in Higher Education. And he's currently working with universities and colleges in Europe, the UK, East Asia, Australia, New Zealand on how best to embed the SDGs in the curriculum. So I'm really excited to be talking to you about where you see where we are at the moment and listening to the amazing things that are happening at the moment. How do you feel we're going? You've been working on this area for a long time. How do you think we're going in terms of the higher education sector, and what has been changing, maybe what hasn't been changing?
Well, I think Australia is actually quite a fair way down the track in a sense. We've actually got the opportunity, I think, now to link and leverage what people have been doing in parallel, and we've already got the networks like the SDSN and ACTS and so on. Actually, we've got the tools to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, not that I necessarily subscribe to the Times Higher Ed Impact rankings on the SDGs, but 8 out of the top 20 universities in the world on this year's SDGs impact ratings with the Times were Australian and New Zealand. And there's 1,500 higher education institutions applied this year. So we're not going too bad on that external metric type idea. I think in terms of what I'm doing around the world, that's a lot of interest, which I think there's a readiness actually for us to get to work on now in Australia and New Zealand, is around actually looking at how we actually shape the curriculum. At the moment, you know, there's people putting in modules and the strategic plans are being put into place, but, you know, the real issue is what do you do on Monday? And so what I've been working around the world on, which is attracting an enormous amount of interest, and I've been doing keynote addresses on, most recent ones were at the International Association for Entrepreneurship Educators, is social entrepreneurship capstones. So the key point being capstones. Where you bring together in a transdisciplinary way what might be a pack of content. And to feed that in, I was Australia's National Senior Teaching Fellow for a number of years from 2014 to 18, looking at, are we developing graduates for today or for tomorrow? And this is not unrelated to some of the conversations we were just listening. And so what came out of that is a website which is currently being used by 18,000 higher educators around the world to reframe the outcomes and their assessment. Because the key test of really what's going on is to look at the assessment tasks, not to look at all of the documentation you put into the accreditation committees. And capstones focused on the sustainable development goals, social entrepreneurship ones, is one way you can see that there is a genuine integrated approach to looking at the 17 SDGs. So that's one thing that's happening, and that's what the entrepreneurship educators were very interested in, and that's what I'm now being asked to advise folks on how to do. So that's one, and tied to that is a second capstone, which is the dilemmas of early career professional practice. Over the last 25 years, we've been actually researching with successful early career graduates in 10 professions, identifying the key dilemmas they actually face in the first 5 years, and using that to formulate a capstone, which is called Dilemmas of Professional Practice, where before you get out there, you look at the mad moments that you're about to experience, and you try to think about what you would do. Now, to underpin all of that, and this is, I'll finish off my answer. What's happening around the world now is there's great interest in not just developing work-ready graduates for today, i.e. with lots of skill and knowledge and understanding what the SDGs are, but work-ready plus graduates for an uncertain tomorrow. Now, what does a work-ready plus graduate look like? They are sustainability literate. They are change implementation savvy. So every single course should be actually helping students to look at how to manage change and mad people when they get out there, which is why the capstone on dilemmas of professional practice is so relevant to students. So you've got sustainability literate, change implementation savvy, inventive socially, not just commercially, but it can be both. And finally, and most critically, and I've just written a chapter for a book on this about the moral purpose for the future of higher ed, is they should actually be, when they emerge, be clear on what their position is on the tacit assumptions currently driving the 21st century agenda. And they are assumptions like globalization is great for everyone, consumption's happiness, ICT is always the answer, etc. So those broad philosophical value-based things are important. Why? Because to be a graduate who's actually work ready, plus you're only tested when things go wrong and when you've got mad moments and when you're trying to embed the SDGs and no one's engaging. How you manage yourself there is critical, and that's the plus bit. It's no good having lots of knowledge if you don't know how to manage a mad person, basically. So that's, in a sense, a global picture of what's going on. And I'm just currently working now with folks in Japan and Malaysia on that as well. So it's not just literally Western. So that, I suppose, is essentially it. And I suppose if there's one thing that everyone now is interested in, and which you've now identified today, is how can we help local leaders learn how to actually become work ready plus themselves? And that's what that research we did for the Australian government in 2012, Turnaround Leadership for Sustainability in Higher Ed did. It identified from successful SDG local leaders what it was that they did to manage the mad moments and to engage the disengaged. And I can respond to that in a little while if you want me to. But that's a sort of, hopefully that's helpful. That's a picture of where the world's at. You know, much more focus on work ready plus graduates, not just on the SDGs, much more focus on capstones, much more focus, by the way, on not just looking at climate change, but looking at the interface between social, cultural, economic and environmental sustainability, which is the 17 SDGs combined together.
That sounds like a really great vision for where universities and higher education institutions can start thinking about. And we've heard, though, that there's a lot of challenges and barriers for people trying to enact these kinds of changes. Do you want to maybe, from your experience, identify what you see as the main barriers and maybe some of the ways to overcome them? And I'll just say to people, if you want to ask Geoff any questions, please either post them in the chat or in the Q&A.
No, by all means, and you know, happy to follow up after the session too with folks if you aggregate them up. You know, it's a pleasure to work with you all. Or some of the barriers are you don't have senior leaders that actually get it. So, you know, we had an example from QUT where there is a senior leader. You've got to have someone actually on the executive, but you've also got to have a local network of trained ESD leaders using the tips that I'm about to give you on how you actually operate successfully from our research anyway. So that's one barrier. Another one is, I think, the failure for universities to realise just how interested students are in sustainability at these days. And so we've had one lot of data mentioned to us earlier today, but there is also the UNESCO's done a survey of 3,000 students where they've identified 91% want a lot more focus, 25% don't even know what the SDGs are, 61% actually quite happy to take a 15% cut in their salary to work for an organisation that supports the SDGs. So there's not enough actually promotion of the edge that you can get. So that's one barrier, right? That's just not being recognised. Some of the other ones is the fact that we've got in 2010, we developed a national clearinghouse for the government on what was happening in sustainability way back then. And then UTS took that over. And there really is a profound need now to take that over. And one of the barriers, I think, is people who are interested, and this has been mentioned today, people who are at the local level who want to get a cunning plan that's actually working have nowhere to really go at the moment. You know, that the sustainability.edu.au site is there, but it needs to be regenerated and built into a national training program for local leaders, which I'm now working on. We've just repeated the turnaround leadership study in Japan and Malaysia. And so I'm just working with Japan and Malaysia on what do you do about a local program to help local leaders with actual things that work. And as part of that, and tied to that, is to do a stock take of what's going on now and building a clearinghouse that's searchable. And that work I did on for the government on building Work Ready Plus graduates, we developed a website called the Flip Correct website, which has on it a searchable web base of powerful assessment tasks. We could do the same thing in relation to ESD, right? Of which capstones would be one example. So if you're interested in fashion and you're interested in capstones that are around social entrepreneurship and the circular economy, you can search for that. And what we would do as a national group is we would set up and this is what I've done for the Flip Crick side, I have an international body that only puts onto that what is actually demonstrably powerful in its impact. So that's the barriers and sort of the ways of tackling the barriers, I think. Basically, I suppose, if I run down my top 10, which is not unrelated to the ones we heard earlier on today, and I'll finish talking then about it. I think, by the way, before I give you the top 10 things on what do you do on Monday, I think the SDGs themselves, in terms of moral purpose, are a set of values that actually should be embedded into what students come out seeing, because they're actually full of values. And there's a profound difference between change and progress. You know, change is something becoming different, but we need to be looking at what is valuable. And that's why I think there's a big error in moving simply in Australia down to STEM. We should be doing STEAM, the A. The A is about the values. There's no such thing as a value-free scientific breakthrough. And so this is SDG.
What does the A stand for?
Arts.
Okay, sorry.
It's arts, right? Humanities, social sciences, everything which the government currently doesn't seem to value, right? And ask yourself why. Okay, so that whole issue then of actually getting something organised around that, a national thing that looks at a clearinghouse for us, I think is very important. And I think the SDGs are a set of values, and I think the SDGs gets people to think about, is this progress or is this actually just change? And capstones are a way for us to elegantly do that without having to overcrowd the curriculum.
Great. And I think we're having a conversation tomorrow about that sustainability.gov.edu.au website. So tune in for that.
Well, it's ready to go. And, you know, there's the clearinghouse, the flip curriculum is one humble model of how it could be restructured. But I would be putting a second component, which is what do you do on Monday bit, right? Not just what are some of the cunning plans that we could implement, but how do you make them happen? And
So I think we really want to hear what your the additional tips on the what do you do on Monday. There are. Okay, so
I'll give you that.
We should cover that.
Yeah, I'll cover that, and then I'll throw it open to any questions and so on. So the first thing, always, this is what I've learned, and this is what I did when I was setting up the sustainability strategy for Western Sydney Uni. Always listen, link, leverage, and lead in that order, never in any other order. You go out first of all and you do a stock take and find out what folks are doing already, and you've already had that mentioned today. You then build a website around that so that you illuminate it for people. You then go to the executive and show them what they're sitting on, because they don't even know. Then you leverage that against the fact that, Barney, Vice-Chancellor, would you like to look good? Would you like to actually maybe get us ranked high on the Times Higher Ed Impact rankings? Because we've got this, look what we're sitting on here. And this could look good. And here's the criteria. And maybe, you know, maybe we could use this external lever for internal work. So you're actually dealing to the agenda of the senior executive. But you do it, listen, link, leverage, and lead via a stock take. You then always need to get a senior mentor. Now, if you don't have a senior mentor, someone who's actually an executive, you do have a problem because you're only preaching into a vacuum. The next one is always try solutions under control. This is everything that we did at Western Sydney Uni. Jen Dolan can tell you all about this. You know, we did this, which incidentally got us third in the world in 2020 on the Times Higher in Impact thing. So Barney was happy. We try solutions always under controlled conditions first. So if you want to try a capstone, a social entrepreneurship capstone, you know, then you actually trial it under controlled conditions with a small group of people. And you go out and find out what others are doing. So we looked at the Enactus site, which you're probably all aware of. Enactus 2030, that's where students work on social entrepreneurship projects out of universities around the world, and they're all categorised against the SDGs. So we then tried a social entrepreneurship capstone. You try it under controlled conditions, and then the group that tries it works out what's worked by doing it, not by trying to plan it. Then they become mentors for the next set of interested. And you can see how that would fit then into a national clearinghouse. And the final couple of tips really is consensus around the data, not around the table. You know, there's a lot of consensus about we all should do this, but there's no data to show that that's wise. and developing Lonely Planet guides written by successful ESD local leaders for others on how they did it in a particular area. And those things could be loaded up onto your website if you were to regenerate the website. And I think that user designed searchable clearinghouse, and that's what's critical if you do want to regenerate the sustainability.eu.a site, it's critical that it becomes user designed, which is what I did with the Flip Correct site. I worked with 3,700 learning and teaching leaders around the world to develop that site up on how they would like it to look, what they would like in it, what they wouldn't like. And so if you do proceed to try and get a national clearinghouse, which I think is the next step for networking the networks, is make sure you do it a user-centered design, but possibly with what's a cunning plan on the one component and how do you do it on Monday on the other side. So that's my entire career really summarised. There's nothing else left for me to say now. And don't ask me to come back until 5 years, because I find after 5 years people have forgotten what I've said, but otherwise it'll be the same tired old rubbish all the time. Anyway, there you go. Love your work. Carry on.
No, well, I'm loving what you're saying, and I'd be really interested to hear from if people want to share whether that resonates, this kind of advice with them. And in fact, there was one barrier that someone had particularly asked about that you didn't mention, and that's around the accreditation bodies. Yes. Got so much wisdom on everything, and so maybe that's come up as a really big thing today. Maybe you have some thoughts about that. Yes, that's now the way in which I did a study with New Zealand for engineers in New Zealand with all the engineering firms in New Zealand, and then the peak body. So what I did over there, remember it's listen, link and leverage. We were doing we'd done studies of successful early career graduates, including many years ago when I was at UTS with successful early career engineering graduates. The New Zealand accreditation body and the national coordinating group network, the New Zealand engineers or whatever it's called, they showed interest in that. So the first thing is to say, would you like to have us do a study for you on what profile successful early career graduates actually have, identified by their employers and clients and colleagues as being really effective? Would you like us to do it? If they say no, then you forget it. But that's what we did there. We then did the study, and then from that, you can actually start them to think much more carefully about what they've got in their accreditation requirements for course learning outcomes, because you're actually educating them by listening, linking and leveraging, using successful travellers as your tool. Now, we've done the same in nursing, we've done the same in a whole range of professions, which I won't bore you with now, but that notion of using successful early career graduates as your backward mapping tool for validating both the accreditation body standards, but also your own standards, is an absolute winner, because the students love to know what a successful traveller's found. I mean, that's what we all do. That's our buddies are basically successful travellers on the same path that we phone up. So we should do that more systematically. So that's how I would tackle the accreditation bodies. Great, and yeah, that's I think it's definitely worth trying out. It would be interesting to hear what the law sector thinks about that. Now, we really have to wrap up, unfortunately, and I might pass on to you a couple of other questions that have come up. But is there anything you want to leave, like one thing you want to leave that particular people who are very new in this area, and we've heard that we need people from across all disciplines to now start having these skills in embedding education for sustainable development across. What is the one piece of advice you would give them? Well, like all good people, I can't give you one piece of advice, but I can give you two. And they are just lessons I've learned from my career, having started first as a tutor at Macquarie Uni in 1971. And that is, good ideas with no ideas on how to implement them are wasted ideas. And there's too much talking and not enough about understanding what you do on Monday. And that's why I've been arguing about this need for actually us setting up a local, properly formulated training program for one another to work out what works with one another. And the second one is, change doesn't happen, it must be led, but deftly. And so that's why you need to get a senior mentor, but we also need to recognise, and this is my final point to everyone, you guys out there who are at the pit face are the final arbiters of whether any change in this area ever actually happens. It is local leaders
that actually translates brave, sustainable development plans into action. If local leaders don't engage and they don't engage their staff, there is no change, and therefore there is no benefit for students. And it's our moral purpose to be embedding those 17 Sustainable Development Goals as values into our curriculum. And that's why the key people are the local leaders, and that's why we've got to start supporting them.
Wow, thanks so much, Geoff. And I think these are incredible words for, regardless of where we are in this big system, it's relevant for all of us. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience. And unfortunately, we have to start wrapping up, and I'm going to pass back to Rhi to close us off for today.
Hi, thanks everybody. I'm just going to remove your spotlight, Tahl. There we go. Okay, so have I done that, Tahl? Have I removed your spotlight? There we go. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to officially wrap up the session today. If you do have to run off, I appreciate we're just on the hour now. I apologise, we've gone a couple of minutes over. If you do need to leave, that's fine. Hopefully we will see you return tomorrow for day 2 of the regional forum. So we've got another session with a fantastic range of speakers joining us tomorrow, and then again on Thursday as well. Thank you to all of our speakers that have shared their thoughts and insights and activities today. We really appreciate the time that you've given us and joined us with us. So as promised, we're going to wrap up the session today with a question. So I'm just going to bring this up on the screen for everybody at the moment. We do have a Menti question that is live. So we're all pretty familiar with QR codes now. So if you want to whip out your phone and use the QR code on the screen, that will take you to the Menti question. Otherwise, we do have the URL up on screen, and I'm just checking if we've got it in the chat. There we go. Tahl has popped the link directly in the chat for you. So I'll just give everyone a minute there. What are you thinking about at the end of today's forum? Is there anything more you would like to discuss? And was there a discussion that took place today that you're going to think about more? So if you have any comments or feedback around any of those, please pop them into the Menti question right now. And I'm going to share my screen and have a look at what's coming up there. Just bear with me one second. Just making sure anybody's actually put anything in there yet. Okay, so let me go to what have we got? We need more time. This issue is urgent, so less talking and more actions, what's come through. Just hopefully anyone else going to jump in on that one. Just while we're giving some more time on the feedback question for today, another follow-up thing, in case you hadn't noticed, we had used Zoom events as a new platform to run the forum on. I do apologise if anybody had any issues using the event platform. Unfortunately, the registration form was optional for this forum. So for many of you, we have absolutely no details around who you are or your email address. And this is particularly important, not because we want to spam you, but because we do some follow-up things in the forum, including sending out the recording from the events and any of the resources that were generated or shared from participants. So there is another QR code up on the screen at the moment, as well as a link that's available in the chat that Tahl's just shared. If you would like to officially register your email address with us so that we can share the resources that come out of the forum, please do put your details in there now. We'll of course be sharing this link again over the next couple of days at the end of each day. So not too many more people have commented on the Menti at this stage, so that's okay. We will be repeating that question at the end of each 3 days as well. So I think I will officially wrap up for today, given we're a couple of minutes over time. Thank you again to everybody that joined as an attendee, and a special thank you to all of our guest speakers and panelists on the session today. I hope everybody took something away from it, and I look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow. Tahl, I'm just going to quickly check that I haven't forgotten anything.
No, except the link So the form that I created didn't work. So we'll have to fix it for tomorrow. Apologies.
No problem. We will get that form working properly. So sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so hope to see you again tomorrow, starting at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Daylight Savings Time. Thank you again, and that's it. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.